Hello there and welcome to this Hort Innovation Insights webinar. Through the Insights webinar series, we'll seek to communicate key initiatives and updates of relevance for the horticulture sector. We hope that these webinars will uncover some key takeaways that we hope you can take back to inform your business or your other practice. I'm Adam Briggs, the Head of Data and Insights here at Hort Innovation, and we work to ensure that the industry are guided by the latest data and information to inform investments and decision making. And I might be a familiar face for some of you who have joined as part of our previous webinar series. But today we're going to be discussing the horticulture sector's export trade performance over the 2019-2020 period. Our experts will be calling out some of the key growth trends across the sector through the last year, and also some specific products and markets that have been driving the performance. And we're also going to be looking and reviewing the Taste Australia program over the course of the year. And this is an important Hort innovation initiative that continues to contribute and support our export performance. But today, you're joined by two of my colleagues from Hort. We've got Louis Williams from the Data and Insights team and Laura Davies from the trade team. Thanks for having you guys. Thanks for coming along.
Thanks, Adam.
Thanks, Adam.
Good one. Well, maybe we'll just do a quick introduction to each of you. So would you just give a brief background around what you're doing at Hort and how this ties in to the discussion? So Louis, I might just start with yourself.
Yeah. Thanks, Adam. Hi, my name's Louis Williams. I'm an investment analyst in the Data and Insights team at Hort Innovation. And I help out the trade team with their data requirements, but also with the investment managers with portfolio management and investment analysis.
Great, thanks Louis. And Laura, let's hear a little bit about yourself as well.
Hello, yes, I'm Laura Davis. I'm the International Brand Manager for the Taste Australia Retail Programme. So my role is to design marketing campaigns for the export-orientated industries, such as table grapes and citrus, to then be implemented across Asia. Great.
Thanks, guys. Before we move on, just flagging the opportunity for the audience on the line to ask questions, which we'll get to during the second half of the session. So put your questions in the dialogue box on your screen as they come up to you, and we'll address those in the second half of the session. And I'll also flag that this is part one of a two-part series. So this session is going to be focused primarily on the data and the performance we've seen in the 1920 year. The second part of the series, in 2 weeks' time, we'll be looking at a little bit more of some of the current initiatives the trade team is working on to help the sector through the COVID crises. But first, let's just kick things off. It's obviously worth, everyone on the line has an interest in exports, I'm sure, no doubt, one way or another. And we all know how important exports have been to the horticulture growth story over the last 5 to 7 years. And this year has been no exception, with the value now reaching a new record of 2.85 billion. And just to give you a rough indication, I think using the 2018-19 production data, volume of exports represents roughly 12% of the total production volume. So plenty more scope for growth in that volume share as we move forward. Although worth noting that there is such diversity within the sector, within all the different products. So this is, I guess, a good thing in the sense it makes the analysis of the trade data so interesting given this diversity, but also challenging to represent, the nuances of the various products that are traded. So we'll do our best today to get to what we can, but I would like to flag that there is a lot that goes on within the horticulture trade space. But in any case, for the 2019-20 year, it was an interesting year with certainly some challenges in the back half of 2019 with drought impacting on some harvest volumes and also bushfires disrupting supply chains. And then, of course, we saw through the final quarter of the year, from March through to June, the COVID disruptions certainly creating some new situations there for some of our exporting industries. But still overall, really pleasing to see that we have continued to see that growth trajectory continue into this year. But I'll hand over now to Louis, and I know he's been busy looking over the data for the 1920 year. And I'm sure all of you on the line will benefit from hearing about what he's been able to draw out for you. So I'll hand to Louis now, and he can take us through what he's been able to find. So take it away, Louis.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. I'll just share my presentation. And I guess in terms of how I've structured this, firstly, I'll speak to the overall horticultural export performance from a top line perspective. And then we'll look at top export products, look at top export markets, and then we'll just highlight the largest export market in China, and then highlight the second largest export product in table grapes. And I'll probably call on Laura Davies and her expertise there just to share her perspective on those two highlights. So in terms of Australia's fresh horticultural exports, they rose 3% year on year. And as you said, Adam, a really good result considering the challenges that we've had earlier in the year and then in the last quarter as well. And if you look at the long-term trend as well, we're seeing an almost doubling of exports over the last 5 years. And that's a compound annual growth rate of roughly 13%. And so really increasing the volume share there. And if we break it down by category, we can see that fruit accounted for roughly 54% of fresh horticultural exports, nuts 35%, and vegetables made up 11%. And growth this year has really been led by fruit, growing 11% year on year to reach over 1.5 billion for the financial year 20 just been. Unfortunately, nuts just missed cracking the $1 billion mark again this year, unfortunately. But if we sort of move into the top products and the performance of the major export products, we can see here on this slide value year-on-year change in the light green colour, and then the volume year-on-year change in the darker blue. And in the middle of the graph, you can see citrus really had a strong year, growing 13% in value and 14% in volume, reaching roughly 123 million for the financial year. I'll just note that almonds, whilst down slightly at -3% for value terms, that softer volume really came about in the final quarter and might be shifted into this financial year. So we're yet to see that. Something to look out for when figures come out later this month. And if we just scroll into the calling out performance of some of the mid-tier export products for fruit and vegetables, we can see solid growth under the fruit category with cherries and melons up the top there, but particularly mangoes and strawberries and avocados growing in double digits year-on-year growth. We can see strawberries at 39% and avocados growing in value by 27%. Looking at vegetables, carrots is the largest export in the vegetable category, make up roughly 30% of the category share. And not shown is nuts, but in terms of nuts, you see almonds and macadamias really dominate exports in the nut category, roughly making up 96% of the nut category's exports by value. If we just flick across now into looking at it from an export market perspective rather than a product perspective, we can see that China really stands out as a destination for Australia's fresh horticultural exports, but it's really followed by some significant export markets, particularly in our region, with markets such as Thailand, Malaysia, and South Korea seeing some solid double-digit growth. And I'll just point out on the bottom right there, the year-on-year change for South Korea growing at almost 50% from a year ago, and some other markets like Thailand and Malaysia in that double-digit range. Now, just highlighting and moving into, digging deeper into our largest export market in China. As you can see, really strong growth. This is a continuation of that growth story into financial year 20, despite COVID. So that's an increase of 21% in value terms into China, reaching just over $1 billion for the financial year. And as you can see, almost more than doubling over the last 3 years. And I think China really accounts for 35% of Australia's hort exports. And if we look at what are the products that make up that the China market, we can see the usual suspects at the top, but also if we just look down the list in terms of other products that make up the market to China, we can see oranges, mandarins, and peaches and cherries in that $34 million range, and cherries at 27 for the financial year. Really pleasingly, we look over on the right-hand side of the slide, we can see the growth in those products, and mandarins grew at 69% year on year. Very, very strong growth, and macadamia nuts growing 47% in value terms. If we look at table grapes as well, grew 25% year on year in value terms to reach 270 million into China. I might just bring Laura in here to share her perspective. And Laura, do you have any thoughts about these figures? I mean, particularly with COVID and the table grape season being pretty close together, how did that work out?
Sure. Well, it's worth noting that China was already the table grape industry's largest trading partner. And the table grape exports start as early as January and peak in volume in that March to April period. So this coincided with the bounce back that we saw in China from the pandemic, where by late March, restrictions had been lifted and shoppers started to return to normal. And we also saw a rise in e-commerce, which has grown significantly over this period also, unlike other markets, including Australia, where the pandemic during this time had really just begun. So China has really driven the growth of exports for table grapes this season. And now as a proportion of the total share of exports by volume, they make up 42%.
Okay. So I guess COVID had a bit of an influence on that market and sort of explains maybe some of that market share. Maybe we just look at table grapes. They've had such a successful year and the second largest export product. Grew 12% in value terms to reach 623 million. And by 4% in volume terms to 152,000 tonnes. Clearly, you can see on the right of the chart, there's this strong growth in South Korea of almost 200% year on year. I mean, Laura, do you have any insights into why this might be?
Yeah, there's a couple of factors for South Korea. Firstly, the government reacted very quickly to track the COVID-19 infections, and there was never a complete lockdown to date. Also, Korean consumers are highly educated and love anything that's new. And the Australian grape industry should really be commended for developing some new and exciting varieties that have come into production in recent years. So ones that spring to mind are Sweet Sapphire, Autumn Crisp, Cotton Candy. So these have been bred for the export markets in mind and really speak to the taste profiles and preferences of our Korean consumers. But we've also seen a diversification of the sales channels. So there's been a rise in TV home shopping, e-commerce, and also convenience stores. And then across the board, throughout all fruit categories, we've also seen a consumption of fresh fruit as health has become the #1 priority for consumers.
Yeah, that makes sense. I guess there's probably been a few factors that have gone right for that industry in that market. I guess in summary, Adam, if we just sort of go back and look at it from a top level perspective, horticulture did really well, grew 3% year on year to reach 2.85 billion in the financial year 20, despite the challenges that we're seeing. And I guess led by fruit, growing 11% year on year to just over 1.5 billion. Looking at it from a product perspective, table grapes, as we said, grew 12%, and citrus had a good strong year, growing 13% in value terms. And then in a market, in looking at it from a market perspective, we saw continued strong growth in China, growing 21% year on year to reach over $1 billion of fresh horticultural exports. So I guess that's sort of slides that I had, Adam, and maybe that provides a bit of basis for our discussion with Laura.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Louis. And that's, really interesting to see. And obviously China dominating, but I mean, China aside, it's also good to see some of those mid-tier markets sort of still pulling their weight. And I guess, we are, quite a diverse sector, and that diverse market sort of continuation will sort of help that growth story. So, and nice to see with the growth from 18-19, which I think was a huge year in the 20% growth range. We've been able to hold on to that into this season as well. So that's been good. And I mean, there's so much more we could get into, just given the depth of everything. So I think that's given us certainly a good teaser for everything that's gone on in the period. So thanks for that. And I might draw in now, Laura. We heard a little bit before, Laura, just on some of that commentary around the China story and table grapes, but maybe we might just take a step back and just I'd like, given your work that you're involved in with the Taste Australia program, I think it'd be really good just to explore some of those initiatives there and how that is related to the 2019-20 period. So maybe just for those on the call, it'd be really beneficial if you could perhaps just start by just giving a brief background of the marketing Taste Australia initiative and sort of where that sits within the horticulture, basically for the horticulture industry.
Sure. So Taste Australia is the across horticulture brand for the export orientated industries that wish to promote in the overseas markets. So it's a B2C promotion that can be anything from in-store sampling with our retail partners to media relations, digital advertising, and then in this last 12 months, we've seen more e-commerce initiatives come into the program. So our most recent campaign was with table grapes across 7 markets, and then to date we have a live campaign with citrus in 4 markets.
Yeah, right. So B2C, you're basically connecting the business with the end consumer, if that's a fair summary.
That's right, yes. So our aim is to make Australian horticulture products the #1 choice for our Asian consumers.
Mm-hmm. And I'm interested just in this table grapes campaign you mentioned there, and obviously the strong growth they've had. Like, I guess, what are the sort of the key objectives sort of you're trying to get out of the campaign and the market coverage through that campaign?
Sure. So our objective was to build awareness and establish a premium positioning in our key export markets. With the Taste Australia brand really dialing up the consistency of delivering on the taste and value proposition. And I just note we've got some overarching results from the campaign that's popped up on the screen. So I think I'll just dive into that while we have it. So the campaign covered 27 markets. We normally hold about 1,000 sampling sessions, but given COVID this year, we really had to dial that down as many were reduced or cancelled. Particularly in Japan, they were placed on strict lockdown, so in-store sampling was actually prohibited. But we did also have some wins, particularly in Korea, where table grapes were sold on TV for the first time ever on a home shopping broadcast, which was Shinsegae, which is the photo you see on the screen, and also K Shopping. So we ran 4 broadcasts, and each one had over 800,000 viewers, and roughly over 55,000 kilos of grapes were sold every 30 minutes that broadcast was run.
Wow, maybe that's so that probably possibly explains some of that growth we saw there in Louis' presentation. If I'm hoping, because that was in the 200%, I think, from what I recall there. So that's actually really good to see. Maybe just looking forward to the 2020 summer period, Laura. What have you got in the mix for there? And I guess you mentioned you had to make a couple of changes there with the Korean market, with the Japanese market. I'm sorry, in the COVID environment. What's going on there around adapting and responding to particular restrictions or constraints in operations?
Sure. Well, we're certainly in really uncertain times, but we're well connected on the ground and in constant dialogue with our retailers in market, as well as our industry partners, particularly exporters. So our aim is to ensure that we design a program that fits for the markets that they want to go to, but also have an emphasis this year on media and e-commerce, which we've seen through trends that this has grown significantly, and consumers are switching their buying behavior from that in-store format to online. So we'll change the campaign where needed by each market as the pandemic unfolds.
And what are some of the products that you'll be handling as part of that summer period? Do you cover all of the horticulture products?
Sure, yes. So we are in discussions with those industries at the moment and understand that there are some difficulties with freight, particularly. So that relates to the likes of cherries and summer fruit. But we also have table grapes that will soon come round that we'll be working with also. So really just staying in touch with industries on a regular basis, and HIA trade team also facilitates forums to make sure everyone's up to date. And in fact, the next trade webinar that we have coming up does speak to some of the work the trade team have done in that freight space to support these industries.
No, of course, and yeah, good plug there for that second one. We'll be able to go into a bit more detail. Maybe just in closing, Laura, how can growers, for any growers on the line, I think it'd be beneficial to understand how they can actually take advantage of all of the work you're doing and how they can get more involved in the program, and particularly any benefits from their involvement.
Sure. Well, we love having growers involved, and certainly our overseas consumers do too. They love hearing from the growers themselves, and the growers' stories always work really well. So absolutely, door is always open to get in touch with myself, to be part of any of our events, and also be featured in some of our media and social posts. But in fact, today at 5 p.m, we have a citrus media online event being broadcasted from the Philippines, which I encourage all to attend, as this year is very unique that everyone can. So again, just feel free to reach out to any of the Hort staff for the link on that one later.
Yeah, great. No, definitely. Well, I'm sure we'll have to put some details out about that after this call for sure. Yeah, well, okay. I'm just looking at the clock and looking at the questions that have been coming in. So I think that's been a really good synopsis there, Laura. So thank you for that. It's been very beneficial just to get our head around all the really good work that's going on. I'll just again remind those on the call, we've had a few questions come in, but this is your chance to get your questions down in that chat box, and we can spend some time over the next couple of minutes going through and answering some of the questions that have been coming in. We've just had a question just off the back of that citrus promotion, Laura. Would it be possible, maybe while we're going through those other questions, just to put that link or some details in the chat box for the attendees, if they could see?
Absolutely, I will get that in the chat now. Yeah,
that would be really helpful, because I think there certainly sounds like some good interest there. There's a question here, just probably back to the data side of things, and just continuing on with the China story. Someone's just asking around the percentage of the total exports that do go to China from a horticulture perspective. So Louis, I'm not sure if you've got that data on the hand, and I guess they've just raised, I guess a few concerns around if we're putting too many eggs in one basket, so to speak. So maybe let's just sort of get the score straight with the export share.
So as a percentage of value, China accounts for 35% of Australia's total hort exports, which is in line with roughly a third for all of Australia's agricultural exports as well. But we do have a sort of a significant tail of other markets with growing middle class, such as Vietnam and Malaysia and Thailand in our region. And you can kind of see that coming through in South Korea as well, where they're getting a taste of Australia's fresh horticultural produce and are willing to sort of have this strong demand for it as well.
Okay, no, thanks. Well, yeah, I guess that's good to, somewhat comfort to know that we're kind of in line with the agricultural average there, and we're not sort of, an outlier in that respect.
No.
I've got a question here. Laura might be able to have a go at it, but it's a trade-based question on exports exports of avocados into China. The person's asking around the permits into China for avocados and if there's been any progress made there. Laura, I'm not sure if you are familiar or would be able to answer that question. If not, it might be something we need to bank for the second webinar.
Let's bank that for the second webinar. There is some work being done in this space, but we won't be able to give it the attention it deserves in the next couple of minutes now.
Okay. I'll continue with you, Laura, and there's another question coming around the vegetable export promotions for 2021, and just someone's just asking for a little bit more detail around the specific activities you have planned for vegetables.
Sure. So vegetable promotions work under our Taste Australia trade events. So we're currently in discussions with industry to have this as an online event with some of our hero trade forums such as AFL and others down the track in the new year, be on that digital platform. So watch this space. There's definitely something happening, but we will loop back once all confirmed.
Okay, so it sounds like a bit more of a new approach this year with with online events. Okay. There's been a few questions. Louis might be able to have a bit of commentary here on the role of the exchange rate, which is interesting. So optimal, any guidance? Any guidance on the exchange rate in terms of an optimum balance to help maintain competitiveness, particularly with the fresh produce. So I know exchange rate's kind of a little bit softer these days, but maybe just to outline some of that.
Well, I think just looking at the question, I think they're looking at with a rising Aussie dollar, we might start to see Australian fresh produce become more expensive for for other markets, and so that would have a detrimental impact on Australia's horticultural exports as they become more expensive. However, I think it's very hard to say where an optimal level is for Australia's horticultural exports. I think exchange rates are determined by many things, and I think that at around 73 cents, that right now where we're sitting is considered par, but I do note that there's a few market watchers talking about high Australian exchange rates as the US dollar keeps falling. So it's something to definitely keep an eye on, but not something to keep you up at night.
Yeah, no, I think you've said that well. Again, that's good. I am just looking at the clock here. A few more questions, which I don't think we'll have time to get to, unfortunately. But we will endeavour to answer those via our website, as we have done for previous webinars. So don't feel like you're not going to get the chance to have your questions answered here. It does bring us out of time, and I think that's hopefully been. We've packed a lot into half an hour. And certainly we could talk certainly longer on this topic, because it is no doubt extremely interesting and such an important part of the horticultural growth story. And I suppose that's also why we've, sort of split this into a second series. So be sure in 2 weeks' time, same day, same time in 2 weeks, we'll be running a session in a little bit more detail with the trade team to look at some of those initiatives that are being engaged with currently to help the sector navigate the COVID environment at the moment with respect to exports. So we hope you can carry on from this session into that session in 2 weeks' time. But thanks, Louis and Laura, for your time and joining us today. We really appreciate you sharing your knowledge with us all. So thanks.
Thanks, Adam.
And you would have seen in that chat box, we've got the details on that citrus campaign for 5 o'clock this afternoon. More detail on from Taste Australia is at tasteaustralia.net.au. We've recorded this session, so keep an eye out for that in addition to those question and answers on the website. And I think that takes us through to 1:30. So thanks everybody for joining us today and wishing you all the best.
Thank you.
Bye.